Welcome back to the Candy Colored Studio. I'm Katrina Berg, and I'm so excited to spend some time with you and with our special guest, Julianne Donaldson. And Julianne, welcome.
Thank you, Katrina. I'm so excited to be here. I've just been a fan of yours and have been looking forward to an opportunity to talk to you. So thank
Oh
you for
my
having me.
goodness. Ditto. So for those of you that recognize Julianne's name, she is an award-winning author, and some of the series, the Arab books that you probably are familiar with are her Brooke series, and then Blackmoore, and then she has this brand new poetry collection that we're going to talk about today as well. And so, so many exciting things. But just as an introduction, I read Blackmoore with my book club, like, I don't know, probably in 2013. Is that about when it came out? In
Yeah, that is.
2013?
Yeah.
So, and I just remember thinking, holy cow, like I already knew that historical fiction was my favorite, but I thought, why did we not read more of these instead of the history books? Because I feel like it's so much more personal. um Anyways, you do such a good job of researching and just really giving us a sense of the place and the time and the people. And anyways, I could talk about it forever, but I'm so excited to hear more about your process, but then also about your transition into your new collection. So this is going to be super exciting.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you enjoyed Blackmore and it's fun. I love writing historical. I love writing period, but historical is my jam. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, you do it so well. So yeah, it's just one of those things where there's so many things that we could talk about, but I would love to have you introduce yourself, maybe your kids. I think that it's really amazing for people to realize that so many good things can happen when we have little kids, when we're raising little kids, right? Because I mean, how old were
Oh,
your kids when you started
yeah.
writing?
Yeah, I started writing, trying to get published when my second child was born. So he was a baby, and then I had a toddler. And I realized, like, oh, this is what I really want to do. I really want to be published.
Yeah.
And yeah, little kids are just, that's like the best time to really dive into like creative outlets and hobbies and even a career because there's so much you can do when they're little that you can't do when they're older. I mean,
Yes.
the nap times don't exist anymore once they're older than 5 or 3.
Yeah.
And the park play dates and even just play dates in general are a lot harder to come by when they get older and you're running them around places and that you don't, when you have the little kids, it's like we can spend all afternoon at the park. And that was just the time to really just dive into my creativity. So,
Oh, that's so beautiful. So remind me how old your kids are now.
okay, so I have 5 kids and they all have summer birthdays. So they'll all be turning the next year. I'll just round up for you. So my oldest is 20, which is crazy. And then my second is 18. And my middle child is 16. And then I have, so it's girl, boy, girl. And then I have 13-year-old boy and a 7-year-old boy.
Oh, that is
So
so great. So your older two, are they out of the house?
my older one is out of the house, and then my son is just graduated from high school.
Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
You know, I have a
Couple weeks.
I have a Sunday school youth class that I teach, and I was asking them just, how are things going? And the one was like, oh my gosh, these UAs, if we could just get through and, deal with the UAs and we can graduate. I'm like, what is a UA? I didn't know that they called unexcused absences UA. Like I'm clearly just out in the clouds. But I guess they hadn't been keeping track of them, like, all through COVID and then the first three like quarters. And then this quarter they're actually paying attention to it. So those poor kids are just like, I just want to walk.
Oh, it's been the hardest time, and it's hard to stay motivated to go when it was optional for so long. It was so hard to get back into the groove of actually going and then having to deal with consequences when you didn't go. Like,
Right.
what? I can't make up that test. I can't make up that assignment.
And
I just,
yet, what a great life lesson, right? Because why not
yes.
learn it in high school when you're not paying for it? I mean, I know we as taxpayers are paying for it, but the students aren't necessarily paying for it like they would for college. So I don't know. I feel like we've had a lot of good life lessons this past year.
I know it is. It's good. I just keep pushing my teenager. I'm like, let's just get on. Let's just graduate and get on with life. We're so close.
Right? Totally. Yeah. Well, I think that I just want to send a lot of love out to all the moms right now
Me
who
too.
have seniors because it is such a big deal. Like their lives were thrown upside down, I think, in such a unique way. I just don't think that we really understand even the ramifications right now. So, I mean, just yeah, so much love to you, to your son, and yeah, all the graduating seniors this year. It's just such a big deal.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. It's been so rough. And I just think, if we're all still going, like bravo. I think we should throw ourselves a party.
Totally. Totally. So I am kind of curious, like how obviously you've got older kids and you're very busy. I mean, you're totally right. Life seemed so hard when our kids were little, but now that they're, older, especially like the tweens and the teens, the high school age, like you say, you're just driving them places all the time. And those moments where you spend the afternoon at the park and you have naps, it's gone. It's gone. So I'm curious, like, how has that affected your writing schedule?
Oh, it's completely destroyed my writing schedule.
That's, thank you for being honest. I think everyone needed to hear. Yeah.
The idea of a schedule is laughable. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't have one anymore. I
Thank
think
you. I know everyone keeps asking me that too, and I'm like, I'm just trying like bits and pieces here and there, and
yes. Yeah.
sometimes we just give up sleep to finally get something done, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like, just having with the pandemic and having the kids home so much more. Even now, my two younger kids, they just go a half day to school and they don't have school at all on Fridays. It's like having a bunch of kindergartners around. And
Yes.
I'm like, oh
Oh my
my gosh.
goodness. Okay, so remind me which district you're in.
So we're in Alpine School District, but my two younger kids go to a charter school.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so
And so
so
their
that it
schedules.
starts insanely early, like way too early for me because I'm a night owl.
Yes.
And then it's done at 1:30. I'm like, oh, come on. That's just not enough time. I
Mm-hmm.
really need more time.
Oh,
So
totally. Yeah, I think I remember reading somewhere, I don't know if it was on your Instagram or your about page about you being a night owl. And I was like, oh, thank you. Me too. I totally am. And that has been, yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. Okay, well, this is
yeah.
good. I'm grateful to know that. So why don't you tell us a little bit, like anything you want to share about your background, about like you personally, and then like when you knew you wanted to be a writer and a poet, anything you want to share along those lines.
So I grew up just loving books. I was like the 4-year-old who taught myself how to read, reading Go Dot Go. I was like obsessed with books from a really young age. And I never thought it was something that I would grow up to write myself. It was always like, like authors are someone on a pedestal and they're not like normal people. And but I just loved books. And when I was in 8th grade, I had this great English teacher named Mrs. Reagan, and she gave us an assignment to write a poem. And all of my poems up to this point had been something about horses because I was a horse fanatic, And but this one assignment was a little bit different. It was about playing the piano, and I was imagining I was one of the notes. I was one of the musical notes, and and when this person sat down to play, I was allowed to be set free and dance. And I loved to dance. And then as soon as they stopped playing, then I had to go back under the keys. And she just really encouraged me and said, "This is great. Why don't you polish it? Now let's submit it to this." There was like this multi-school publication where you could submit pieces of writing or art or whatever, and they would choose the best ones for publication. And they published it, and it came in this little bound book, and I just felt like, oh, this is so wonderful. Like the whole experience was just so gratifying and fulfilling. And anyway, so I went on to just be a voracious reader, and I studied English in college, and still had no thought of being a novelist. I thought that was something you did when you either had a lot of time or you had a graduate degree or something like that. But I I was, raising my kids. So I had my first when I was like 27. And then my second, my mom told me, oh, yeah, have them close together. It's super fun. And they're less than 2 years apart. And I was like, oh, mom, maybe you had different personalities of kids, but this is not super fun. This is like protect the baby from being smothered by the toddler, like constantly. And I just felt like I had lost myself. I was one of those students who really thrived in school and loved that kind of intellectual challenge and loved getting the grades. And I just felt so lost once I was done with college, and just not just at home, but it felt like that. It felt like just at home, even though home was the most important place for me to be at that time. I just felt so lost there. And I was like, you know what? I've got to have a creative outlet. And I tried all the things that all the other moms around me were doing, like the quilting and the baking and the interior decorating and all this stuff, and first of all, we were poor college students. So I didn't have money for interior decorating or even quilting, really. And secondly, like it just wasn't filling my creative bucket the way I wanted it to. And I was reading it with my kids, picture books and all sorts of books. And I was just like, this is what I love. This is what I've always loved. I'm going to try to write myself. And so it became like this lifeline for me, where I felt like I could take my little kids and sit them down in the sand in the little neighborhood playground, and I had my notebook and pen. And anyone can afford paper and pen, that's very cheap to come by, and I took it everywhere with me. And and instead of sitting there feeling like this is so boring, I'm so bored, I was sitting there thinking, what's a poem I could write? What's a picture book I could write? I was just dreaming up magazine articles, short essays, and I would take my kids to the library and I would check out books on they had these big books that was like Writer's Digest or something. I can't remember the title, but it was like before the internet, really, before all this information was on the internet. You could find like publishers of different magazines and as well as book publishers, and like their submission processes and how much they paid. And I was like, I'm going to get something published. And I would do all my research, and it was just that intellectual challenge that I really needed at that time. And it was something that when everything else felt like it was undone, like so much of what we do as homemakers is like the perpetual pushing the boulder up the hill and then having it fall back down and pushing it up again the next day. It's just that kind of repetitive, where's where's a finished product that I can be proud of? And a lot of times there isn't one, because you're never done. And if you do get done, then they mess it up pretty soon afterwards. But with my writing, it was always there. It was like, oh, okay, I found the perfect word for this line in this picture book, and that will always be there. And that was something that I could go to bed feeling like I've achieved something. That was really like it really saved me, because I was feeling really depressed about my life situation. So that's really what got me into it. And then I'm just ambitious. And so I was like, okay, I want to write a children's book. And I started submitting picture books to publishers, and they were all rejected, but it was fun to submit. And then I was like, okay, what's another goal I could have? I want to get something in a magazine. And so I got something published in a magazine. And then I was like, okay, now I want to get paid to get something published. And so I was just researching and sending in. And when I got my first paycheck for getting something published, it was it was very small, and it was for a few children's poems. And I was like ecstatic. I mean, I still remember the date. It was March 3rd of 2009. You know, I was like, I've made it. And it was, it was a 6-year journey to get that first paycheck from the time I started, you know, having the desire to be published to actually making money off of my writing. And from there, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is this is it for me. But I felt like, you know, and maybe I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. It's like, how do you go from writing little ideas or little stories to writing a novel? Like it still felt like it was insurmountable to me. And I thought it was something I had to go back to graduate school for, or something that would have to wait for a different stage in my life, because was still raising little kids. And besides that, my husband was in law school, and I was working part-time doing all sorts of side hustles just to support the family. And that's actually when writing became even more important. That creativity was like my lifeline. And it was late nights, and it was every nap time, or just a few moments at the park, or waiting to pick up my daughter from school. It was just taking my notebook with me everywhere, and just having something outside of my circumstances to think about just made me just happy and excited every day. So that's how I got started.
That is so beautiful. I think that there's so many gems in there, and I don't know, there's so many things I want to kind of pull out, but I think that, again, like you said, we all need a lifeline. And I almost wonder if we're doing ourselves a disservice. And I think that it's really, really typical to tell our kids, go try all these things, learn all these things, explore and find talents and develop them. And then you'll go to school and you'll get to spend all this time gaining knowledge. But then for a lot of us who realize we do want to be a mother,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like then it's like trash everything you've just learned, everything that you spent 18 to 27 years cultivating, push it to the wayside until you're like 50 or 60. And then maybe you'll be lucky enough to go back and pull those out of your trunk and dust them off and make them part of your life again. And you do feel like you lock away a part of your life in a chest. And I think, it's so hard. It's so hard. And like, think about like postpartum depression. So many of us probably experienced that to a certain extent. And yet how much of it was like emphasized or magnified because we literally took the deepest, most creative and special parts of our soul and literally put them in a closet or a trunk. I don't know. What are your thoughts on
Oh, it's so true. And and as much as I was so devoted to the principle of motherhood, and so devoted to being there for my kids,
Mhm.
and yet being there and being resentful
Yeah.
and and angry and unhappy and bored, like that was not the kind of mother I wanted to be. And I did feel resentful when I really was examining my life. I'm like, why did I invest so much in myself
Mhm.
to put it all away?
Yeah.
And it can feel like, in fact, I had this label for myself, and this was like pre midlife crisis. But the label I had for myself was, I was a throwaway soul. I was in between generations,
Yeah.
and my role was to raise the next generation
Yeah.
and to support my husband in
Yes.
everything he was doing. But like my own, just me as an individual, and what I wanted and
Yeah.
what I needed, it just didn't matter.
Yeah.
And I was so angry about that. I mean, it was an incorrect idea that I had, but
Yeah.
it came from my circumstances and from very legitimate depression that I was feeling, because um, I felt like other people's lives were more significant and more important than mine, and that I had to take on a role of sacrificing. And the best thing about growing older has been realizing how much I am worth and how much um, everything that I want and dream about, how important that is to
Yeah.
God and even to the people around me who love me. Like nobody wants you to disappear. But I felt like that was culturally what I was supposed to do. Or
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I think that if our, I don't know, I don't know if we explained to the generation ahead of us, like, look, look at where we are. And I feel like part of me feels like we couldn't talk about it. We
yeah.
didn't understand what we were experiencing. And I say this because all those feelings of self-sacrifice and loss of value, I felt all of those as well. And so I'm starting to realize there's a lot of us that hit that point. And so I think first of all, we didn't know what we were experiencing. We didn't know why we were experiencing. And I really don't feel like there were a lot of people to talk about these feelings with. And maybe it's just because it wasn't culturally a normal thing to talk about. I mean, once the internet hit for you and I, it was like we started blogging about things. And I think that I just barely started to explore why I was feeling what I was feeling. I was connecting with other women, but I don't, it's just so fascinating because I just think there were so many, I don't know. I hope that our children will not go through the same bouts of just feeling so unvalued, and the depression and the nothingness that you feel, the self-sacrifice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just the loss of self.
Loss of self. Yeah, it's interesting too. My husband, he ended up doing his MBA when I was pregnant with our third, and I would paint at night and he would study as we put the kids to bed. And I remember he told me, he said, I feel like another disservice that the world and culture around us was telling us was that you were to go to school and only focus on school. You were never to do anything else. It was not a good idea to get married before you finish school. It wasn't a good idea to have a job, to have children, all these things. Yeah, you could do it, but it wasn't the ideal way. And what we found in that very intense part of life, he was working full time and doing online MBA and all these things. And he said, I am more in tune, like now that I've balanced all these portions of my life, and not balanced, but I'm addressing all these facets of my life, right? And it was such an aha moment for us, for him. And he was the male part. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and so think of how much, I don't know, I just think that I think we could do so much more for our kids and for their generation, and just say, yeah, you don't need to hide yourself. You don't need to put it away. You might have to give 100, you might have to give 80% to this part of yourself right now. And maybe you only have 20% for that creative outlet, but you can't hide it. Otherwise you suffer, right? We just suffer.
You do suffer, and unfortunately, it just perpetuates to the next generation where we
Yeah.
just have these. I mean, it's great that we just experienced Mother's Day yesterday, right? And so
Yeah.
we've had a little view of how people culturally talk about mothers and motherhood, you
Mhm.
know, and we just kind of keep perpetuating these ideas that a mother is someone who puts everyone's needs before her own.
Yes.
A mother is someone who is always there, no matter what.
Yes.
Mother is, and it's like we elevate um, women, our own mothers, or we hear other people elevate their mothers, and we think that, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be a living martyr or a walking saint.
Yeah.
Like, can't I just be a person?
Yeah. Can I not just be Julianne?
Can I just be right?
I
Can I
just
just
want
be
to
a
be me.
person?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you brought up motherhood because, yeah, it's true. And Mother's Day, just Mother's Day. And I was thinking that quite a bit yesterday. I
Yeah.
was, I couldn't help it. And it's funny, like I don't, I don't particularly have a hard time with Mother's Day because my grandmother and my mother hated Mother's Day. And so I think that I was like, I just should have no expectations for Mother's Day. Just enjoy. And I don't ever ask anything. Like my kids, they know that all I want is a photograph. Like I just want a photograph of all of us. And so we
Yeah.
usually come home from church and take a picture, literally just stick the camera on the tripod and call it good. If we get 2 shots, it's amazing, right? But I got a little teary and my husband was like trying to understand where the triggers were coming from. And I think a lot of it was I was feeling those things that you just described, but I was trying not to let them bother me. Do you know what I mean? Because I thought,
Mhm.
I don't think that's not how I see motherhood. That's not, it's not healthy. I hate to say
Yeah.
that, but I heard things all throughout the day at church, and I thought, how much of this is really coming from our Heavenly Mother, right? Like, how much of this are things that she really wants us to know about motherhood? And I kept thinking about that sweet quote by Sister Sherry Dew. She did that talk, I think it was like 2001 maybe, and she talked about mothers, and she talked about how we were mothers just like that, just by being female, by being feminine, we are mothers. They called Eve the mother of all living, but long before she was even created and long before she had children. And so, again, I thank you for saying that, because I think that we really need to have a hard conversation with ourselves and with our loved ones and say, what are some things that really help us with this idea of motherhood? And what are some things we should literally just throw out the window?
I totally agree. In fact, I saw a post on Instagram by Dr. Julie Hanks. I don't know if you follow her.
Yeah, she's great.
And she was, it was like listing all these things my kids will never say about me on Mother's Day. And it was, my mom was always there for me. She's like, I'm there for them a lot of the time, but when I'm not, then they learn that they can take care of themselves. Right. Or my mom was at every game. She's, I'm at more games that I'm not, but when I'm not there, it's because I'm doing things that are important to me too, or like whatever it was. She's like, we don't need to lay ourselves on this altar.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the poems that I wrote, where I was like, I feel like I keep laying myself on an altar.
Yeah.
And whether it's the altar of motherhood, or it's the altar of guilt,
Yeah.
or regret, or
Yeah.
whatever it was, like I just kept finding myself feeling like I was putting myself on an altar every day. And I was like, I need to, I need to put myself in the proper position on the altar, which is kneeling in front of,
Yeah.
and let the Savior be the one that is actually on the altar, because that's already where he is. That's already where his grace is, and where he's already saving me. And so my attempt to climb onto that altar over and over again is actually futile. It's unnecessary, and it just perpetuates this feeling of victimhood, or the feeling of weakness. And in fact, we're not weak. We just have to be more verbal, I think, um, about what we need, and about who we are, and about um, our weaknesses. And I think that, back when I was a brand new mother, I was living in a BYU married ward, which was like the most Mormon culture you could find on the planet. And I stood up in Relief Society after having like a 6-month-old baby, and I said during the testimony part of the meeting, and I said very honestly, I don't know who I am. I feel like I'm losing my identity. This
Yeah.
is really hard.
Yeah.
And the response I got from the women was not what I wanted at all. I
Oh,
had women come to me and say, "Are you doing okay? What's wrong? You're just having a hard time? You should play with your kids more."
oh,
Stuff like that, where I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, who is feeling the same things I'm feeling? Like, I can't be the only one. Where is everyone else who's also struggling with this?" And not everyone does. Not everyone struggles
yeah.
with motherhood. And I had to accept that was okay, that I struggled and other people didn't. But
Yeah.
I also know that there are plenty of people who do struggle, and don't feel like there's a safe space for them to say, "This is hard. I don't know who I am. Um, I'm bored out of my mind. I'm depressed."
Yeah.
So
Totally. Oh my gosh. I never did the married ward, but I can only imagine. I can only imagine. And I'm so glad that you shared that, because I think you're right. I think that unfortunately, too many of us do feel like we're the other people that feel like this. And what's ironic is that I was like you, I had my first at 27. So there's a really good chance that I was somewhere in the world feeling some of those same things when you were feeling them. We just didn't know each other.
I
And
just,
that's what makes me sad, is that you finally share how you're feeling, and sometimes I wonder if the reason why people feel that, why they react that way, is sometimes subconsciously they know they're feeling it too, and they feel guilty and shame for feeling those things. And so then they, what is it called when you like reflect or you deflect? Help me out. you,
yeah,
you
yeah,
put it
that
on
sounds good.
somebody else. Yeah. And then it just makes me sad, because here you are saying, I'm struggling. Does anyone else feel that way? Because we could we could deal with this together. But I think a lot of times, and maybe I don't think it's just our culture, and I don't think it's just our generation, but I think that it's really too easy to say, if I pretend it's not happening, if I pretend I don't have any of those same feelings, it'll just go away.
And it's easier, yeah, and it's easier to pretend than to face it and to do like the really hard work of digging through, like, it takes so much self-awareness to
Totally.
go into that. And you have to approach some dark places within yourself,
Yeah.
places like, oh, I'm not a saint, or
Yeah.
oh, I'm not the woman I thought I would be when I thought of myself being a mother, or,
Totally.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And yet I feel like, again, all those steps that you took, all that kind of digging deep within your soul, I would have to say that that is eventually what helped you be such a great researcher. And that's your personality, right? Like
yeah,
you're, what did you say? You're ambitious. And I would say that you're also very detail oriented, and that you want to find out things. And so all those traits that were so hard to see in the beginning and feel so alone, don't you think that that helped you be a better novelist, and to kind of take on this whole historical fiction? I don't
def-
know.
yeah, definitely. It's funny because all the traits that made it so hard for me to be a stay-at-home mom with little kids are exactly the things that make me strong as a novelist and even a researcher and a poet. It's like, um I just, and I think that was a gift that I finally accepted, as I've matured, is
Yeah,
just like accepting who I am and not feeling like I should be someone different.
totally.
And yeah, and not just accepting, but like celebrating the things
Yes.
about me that make me different. Where if I feel different in a room full of Relief Society sisters, or at a park with moms, like all I want to do is go sit in the corner and write in my notebook, and that makes me feel like maybe I'm strange or different. Like I'm actually right at home among other novelists.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it helps to find that identity where I do belong.
Totally. And even just this past year, I think a lot of us creative souls, we really, as hard as this past year was, it was nice to have the excuse to stay home and not
Yes.
go to so many events, and have so many things on our calendar. It was nice. It was nice to be a hermit. I went to an art opening just on Friday night, and I was talking to a few artists, and one's wife apologized for like forgetting who I was, because I hadn't seen her in so long. And I laughed and I said, hey, last time I saw you, I think my hair was short and you had a full face, because she was covered.
Oh,
And so I was like trying to remember who she was just by her eyes. And I'm like, yeah, it's a good thing we didn't have a lot of events this past year, because it's just really hard unless you are just willing to laugh about it and just say, this is crazy. It just, I don't know. So it was, for me, it was really nice to just be a hermit, just stay home and create and spend time with my kids, and kind of let go of a lot of things of the world that kind of put a lot of these pressures on us, right?
yeah.
Um, so I think I would love to hear you like tell us, like give us a little peek into research, all the research that needs to be done. I mean, we've kind of touched on it, but I don't know if people understand to the extent of the work that you do to get
Yeah,
these
I
novels, and even your poetry, everything takes so much time and effort.
I love research. I'm just the nerd who never grew out of being a nerd. And when I wrote, so so first of all, I had studied British literature in college. Like that was my emphasis. And I had spent years reading the real classic Regency writers like Georgette Hare. I mean, everyone talks about Jane Austen, but Georgette Hare is really the queen of the Regency romance. She just does it better than anyone else. And I mean, it's a different style, of course, than Jane Austen, where Jane Austen talks more about, you know, social issues and family and things like that. Georgette Hare is just strictly fun, frothy, entertaining Regency, which
Yeah.
is kind of the way Regency is meant to be and what we love about it. So I had spent a lot of years of study already before I decided to write in this genre. And then my favorite part of research, obviously, is going to England. And so every time I write a book, I make a business trip. I
Oh,
take a trip.
yeah.
And like it was so fun to research Blackmoore. So I knew that Edenbrooke was set in the southern part of England in Kent, and it's very garden-like. I wanted, even with the name Edenbrooke, I really wanted to show this idea of paradise because that's how it felt to me when
Yeah.
I was writing, when I was coming up with the story. Felt like this is just paradise here. But I wanted to do something different with my second book. I knew I wanted it to be more of a gothic romance just because I'm always interested in trying new things.
Yeah.
And that meant going north to the moors. And um, I had this idea before I went to England, I had this idea of a scene, of a place, a Blackmoor, that would be on a cliff overlooking the sea. And you would have the ocean, but you would also have the moors behind you. And I didn't even know where such a place existed, but I knew it would be in northern England. And so for my trip there, I flew into Manchester and I started on the west coast and I traveled all the way to the east coast and of course hit all the places you want to see like Chatsworth and Castle Howard and just all the grand estates all along there and drove through the Peak District and the Dale District and the Moore District. It's amazingly beautiful there. It's so varied. And I eventually drove to this spot where I was overlooking the sea. I was in the moors and I was overlooking the sea, and there was a cliff that would have been perfect for a great estate and this darling little tumble down the hill red roof village, little seaside village called Robin Hood's Bay. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is exactly what I dreamed of. And I studied the vegetation there. I studied the history. Um, I really enjoyed incorporating a lot of Greek mythology, and I even drew on my super nerdy English major stuff, and I threw in some Faust. The whole idea of the book was basically it's a Faustian bargain, right? My heroine is like makes a deal with the devil, who's her mother,
Yes.
and then what comes of it, and I threw in a German composer who, and it's so fun when I do the research, when I have the idea and then I do the research and I find that the research coincides exactly with the idea I already had. I love that. Like I'd written all the scenes about this German composer and even the different themes about Faust. And then I thought I should give him a name. I should, like I think of that at the end of my writing, like, oh, I should give this character a name. And I wonder if there was already a German composer who may have been in England at that time who was interested in Faust. And sure enough, there was. His I forget his first name, but his last name was Spohr. And I read all about his life. I'm like, oh, I thought I dreamed you up, but you're a real person. And so like it was just so fun, to like you go to these amazing estates, and they're so hard to imagine from our perspective, especially as an American. There's nothing very old here
Yeah.
compared to how old everything is in England and in Europe. And so, um, like I just was like, well, I need the interior of Blackmoore. What's it going to look like? And I went into Castle Howard and I saw this beautiful, black and white checkered floor, and it had this beautiful domed ceiling, and at the top of the ceiling was this scene depicted of this Greek myth, and I was like, oh, I totally want to use that in my story, and how could I incorporate that into my other themes? Um, and then Fountains Abbey was like probably my most favorite place I've ever visited in England. It's this largest ruined abbey. And it's ruined, of course, because when Henry VIII, broke away from Catholicism, then the abbeys were mostly destroyed. And this has a lot of it still standing, but I felt like it was just my favorite place to be. I was like, this place must be full of really friendly ghosts or something. I don't know what it was, but it just really sparked my imagination. And I thought, I need some scenes where they go to a ruined abbey, and it felt so wonderful and kind of partly spooky, but not in a scary way, more in a like a this is ancient, and you can kind of feel that there are, a lot of things that happened here in this space. And it was just all intriguing and beautiful.
Oh, that's so amazing. Okay, so many questions. How long were you there for both? Like obviously you went on a trip just for Eden
Brooke.
Brook, the
Yeah.
first one, and then you went on a trip for Blackmore, but then did you go back again to do the follow-up Eden Brook books, or did you just draw on the other trip? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't, well, I did go back, and I went to England and Scotland and Spain.
Yeah. So
So,
cool. So you kind of, and that's probably when you started developing your Scottish story that's still kind of in the works, right?
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so then how were you totally by yourself or who did you go with?
I meet friends usually. So I just call up a friend and say, hey, can you meet me in England? And like an old college roommate and a friend. And they're just, I pick people who I think would be fun to travel with and who I think might have that freedom to be able to go, and just call them up. And it's
Oh,
been great.
that's so sweet. And then when they get to read your books, it's so special because they were there with you during the research, right?
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then how long are you there when you go?
It's usually just a week. That's usually as long as I could take away from my kids, you
Yeah,
know.
but that's amazing that you could do all of that in a week. Like you hit a lot of things when you were describing. So my sister Marisa and her wife Emma, they live on the Manchester side of the Peak District.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
yeah, it's seriously heaven. So next time you go back, you'll have to go see them and
Oh,
have them take you to a few places if you can't go with a friend. But yeah, so the very first place they took us was to Chatsworth.
it's
And then
amazing, isn't it?
so amazing. And then they actually, my sister proposed to Emma in the, I think it's the sculpture gallery. Do you remember
Yes,
the sculpture
yes,
gallery? And I
yes.
think
It's
that
amazing.
had the black and white. Didn't it have the black and white floor?
It probably did.
I feel like it did. Anyways, I'll have to go back and look at pictures. But my sister Marisa is super homesick right now because obviously she hasn't been able to travel. So I think she's going to be loving your interview and talk about all these things. But and Robin Hood's Bay, I've totally seen that. Like I ran across. I haven't been getting on Instagram that much, but I did run across um and pinned or like saved some pictures from Robin Hood's Bay. That's super cool. Like that's on my list of things to do, but I have not heard of Fountains Abbey. I'm super excited to hear about that and to go check that out.
Yeah, you should. It's close. Yeah, it's close. It's by York. And York
It's
is
right by
amazing
York.
too.
I loved York. York
Yeah.
was so special.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's so cool. Okay. Other things that I was thinking about while you were talking. Um, Okay. So yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so something that I noticed on your website that I thought was absolutely brilliant, by the way. So for those of you listening, Julianne has a page directed, like it's called Writing Tips. And I think that you probably get so many questions, other women or novelists, future novelists that were just like you and kind of hit that point like, okay, so I'm writing in my journal, I'm writing little ideas down, but how do I get to that point? And so I love that you have that whole page directed to that. So I will link to that in the show notes, but I just wanted to throw that out there to everybody that Julianne has done you a great favor and like written it. And it's not very long. There's like 5 or 6 tips in there. So it's very doable for you to go through, but like brilliant suggestions. So I am curious. I feel like, so one of the themes for the podcast last year, I guess, is it still this year? It's up until, so my years in the podcast go from like November to November. So I had a cute girl ask me, she's like, I want to be an artist, but I want to know if I should go into debt to be an artist, or should I just like take workshops and do, what are my other options? And so I feel like this applies to anyone with any career. I hate to say that, but I feel like gone are the days where college is the only way. Like you even said, you thought you had to go back and get your master's, and then you realized, no, I just need to go along my path. I need to focus on being a mother, and then I need to do these other things. So what kind of advice would you give high school students or just anybody that wants to jump into writing, whether they've hit that midlife crisis or they realize they're losing their value as a person? Like what would you suggest for any of those things?
So the school and debt debate is something that I still am balancing out mentally. And I've been doing it for 20 years because I could go and get an MFA and it would cost $50,000. And I'm sure it would improve my craft. And yet the price tag and the carrying of that debt, like I just finally got myself out of debt and I'm not anxious to get back into it. I'm like, it feels so good to be free of that. I don't know that I need that at this time in my life. Just for the sake of improving my craft. I think there are so many ways to improve your craft, especially now that we've all figured out how to do classes online. I think there are so many opportunities available. So let me share some of my best tips. So number one is there are a lot of books you can check. So starting from free to expensive. Free, go check out books at the library on how to write. So read Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Read The Story Genius by Laura so something.
I can look it up. I'll find it.
I've got it on my bookshelf. Read On Writing by Stephen King, or just go and read the books about writing if that's really interesting to you. I think the best one, and the one that everyone should read, is Bird by Bird.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's totally free. Anyone can do that. Second step up is if you have like a teenager who is really interested in writing and thinks about becoming an author, that's so possible now for young people. It's so doable for them to start publishing at a young age in a way that it wasn't for me 20 years ago. And so that's a completely like viable career option for them. So go ahead and look at some teen writer camps. There's one called Write On. Now, not all of these are going on this year because of the pandemic, but when things get back to normal, they'll probably start resuming some in-person things, but they also will have some online things this year for this transition period. So there's teen author camps that are held in Cedar City, and I think it's called Write On. And that's run by a bunch of writers that are published nationally. There's also I don't know where most people live who listen to this, but wherever you live, there should be a chapter of a league of writers. There should be a writers chapter in your area. And so you can Google that. Or if you want to write in a specific genre and you know what that genre is, you can look up a chapter that's specific for that genre. For example, if you want to write children's books, you can look up SCBWI. That's the Society for Children's and Book Writers and Illustrators. And they are a nationwide organization. They have conferences all over the country, and they also have chapters all over the country. And so you can join one of those chapters. Sometimes the membership is like $50 a year or something, and sometimes there's no membership. If you're here in Utah, there's League of Utah Writers. If you want to write romances, there's Romance Writers of America. So, and then there's local conferences, writers conferences. So that's the next step up. So once you're ready to invest, and this was the best thing that I did for myself when I knew I wanted to write books, the best thing I did was I started investing in conferences. One of the first conferences I went to is called WIFR, WIFYR, and it's writing and illustrating for young readers. It was a week-long conference. It was, at the time I took it, which was like 12 years ago, I think it was $800 for 5 days. I'm sure it's gone up since then, but I was able to meet in a small class size with an author who was my mentor, and then every morning, and then bring my own work to be critiqued. And then in the afternoon, we had panelists and classes that we could attend. And that was so eye-opening. It was so helpful. Now they have a lot of conferences that you can find. You can find an RWA conference. You can find an LTUE conference. So LTUE is Life, the Universe, and Everything, and that's science fiction and fantasy oriented. You can go to Story Makers. There's a conference for people called ANWA, which is All Night Writers Associations. It's for night owls. There are groups that get online. There are Facebook groups for writers. There are authors who are on YouTube who make videos and podcasts on how to write. So there's so much information for you out there. It almost becomes like there's so much to choose from that it almost can become overwhelming. And so just start small. Start with like, what do I want to write? And then start going in that direction and see what you find. And then just for my own little plug, I decided that to do what I wish someone had been doing 10 years ago. And I am teaching online writing classes.
Cool.
And so, and they're like small group, so less than 30 people, and they just run for 6 weeks. And I talk about how to write a novel from the first idea to publication. And then I'm starting another class soon that's more like creative writing, like for people who didn't take creative writing in college, how to, studying it and practicing it and becoming a better writer with pacing and dialogue and description and just all the things, just all the little technical things that can help you improve your writing. And I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who's doing that. I'm sure there's other people, but we have a super fun class. We do it's all women, and we get to just connect and talk about creativity and writing, and it's been super fun.
Oh, that's amazing. So for the writing class, do they just need to get on your email list and I can send them to your, I think is it your frequently asked questions? They can
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put a link to that. So if you're interested in Julianne's finding out more about her 6-week, then yeah, I'll link to the page there. That is awesome. That is so good. I'm so glad that you're doing that. Okay, so another thing, speaking of your frequently asked questions page, I was so impressed when I read it because can I just say good job? Because I read that and I was like, Julianne is so good with her boundaries. And the reason why I say this is I think that any of us that are creative or that have passions, I think that it is so hard to have healthy boundaries, but you absolutely have to, because when we really get down to it, there's only so many hours in the day. We all only have 24 hours. And so you have to carefully choose and prioritize what we have time to do. And I was really impressed because obviously people are always saying, Julianne, do this and Julianne, do that. And you're like, I can't do that right now, or this is where my focus is. And I thought that was really, really good because You'll have to go check out her frequently asked questions page and just read through what I'm talking about. But again, I just feel like I just want to say good job, because I think it's too easy for us to just I'm terrible at this, to just want to please everyone and want to do all the things for everyone. And really, you have to be so careful. So I am curious, like, what are some things? Obviously, you kind of laid out some of them here, but what are some things that you've had to like carefully choose to make time for your writing and for your passions?
Yeah, so it's easy when you first start out to just want to be everyone's friend and just want to help everyone and be nice, right? And then I found that my most important relationships and my most important priorities would suffer because I was trying to please people who weren't that high up on my priority list.
Yep.
Um, so I say no to a lot of things, a lot. I say no to volunteering at school, at my kids' schools.
Yes. Yes.
I I say no to I say no to housework when my kids are not home. If
Yeah.
my kids are not home, that's my time and that's my work time. And I refuse to have them come home and think some magical fairy cleans the house for them every day. So if they're not here, I don't clean.
Smart.
And I say no to all sorts of requests. Professionally, I don't do any endorsements of books or blurbs for books unless my publisher specifically asks me to. So I've done exactly two. I've I've recommended precisely two books. I don't do much on Instagram. I'm sure if anyone has tried to follow me there, they were like, wow, it's been months and there's nothing. I don't review books. I don't, I was for a time, I was doing some freelance editing and I just took that page down from my website. I did it for probably 4 months and then I thought, oh, I would much rather spend my time creating my own work than trying to improve someone else's work.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I say no to most social activities. I really like being a hermit.
Yeah.
And and then that gives me plenty of time to say yes to my own personal needs and yes to my children and yes to what I actually care about.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Thank you. You gave so many good ones. And for for our listeners, if there was just one of those that touched you, yeah, I would totally recommend taking one of those that Julianne suggested, even if it's just one, but I thought they were all excellent. I think it's real easy to be like, oh my gosh, I need to do all of those at once. And then it's too hard, right? So start small. But yeah, thank you. That's perfect. So let's dive just a little bit deeper into your poetry collection. I mean, there's so many amazing and important topics that you cover in this collection, but go ahead and share, like, maybe the journey of creating it or the inspiration, anything that you want to share about this, and maybe even the transition between the historical fiction and poetry, whatever you want to share.
Yeah. So when I so okay, so I published Edenbrooke and then Blackmoore and then Heir to Edenbrooke and then I got surprise pregnant with a caboose who came 6 years after my last one, when right after I'd given away all my baby stuff.
Yeah.
And um that was very challenging physically and emotionally. I was 39. I was like, oh my gosh, my body was not built to do this at this age. And my husband at the time was a bishop. And so there was a lot of stressors in life. And I just really did not find time to write again for a couple of years. Well, probably a year after he was born. And at that time, I signed a contract with my publisher to write this book called Lost in Scotland. And it was not a good creative experience because there was too much pressure on me and my deadline was too tight.
Yeah.
And then I didn't receive the support that I needed in order to do that. And at that time, everything kind of fell apart for me personally. That was the year that my marriage just completely broke, and um and I had to leave. And I went through this period of time after that where I felt like the writing part of my brain was broken.
Yeah.
In fact, the reading part of my brain was broken too. I couldn't read a book. I couldn't write a book. And I definitely couldn't write a romance because I was so jaded and cynical, and that's not real, and I can't write anything that I don't believe in my heart. And since I don't believe in love and forever, then I can't write that. And um and then and then also I was a single mom with 5 kids. So my youngest was 2 and my oldest was 15. And when you have a shared trauma in a family, we had a lot of trauma, and it was more than just the divorce. There was other things that happened around that experience. And when you have that kind of shared trauma, it just affects everyone. And for a long time, we were just really, really broken. And it was like I spent I spent a year taking each of my 5 kids to a different counselor every week, where, that's like a part-time job. And just managing all of the brokenness of our family and the uncertainties and the continued trauma that was going on as I worked on a more peaceful relationship with my ex-husband. There was just a lot of hurt. And the last thing I could do was sit down and dream up some fairy tale romance. It
Right.
just wasn't
Right.
possible.
Yeah.
Um, and so I told my publisher, hey, we're not gonna ever publish Lost in Scotland. That's kind of tainted for me because it, it's all associated with all the bad things that
Yeah.
happened at
Yeah.
that time. And I really wanted a different career. I really, really, really wanted a career that was not creative,
Mm.
that was gave me like a reliable income and benefits, because now I'm like I have to support myself and my kids. Like I can't just hope for a nice royalty check every 6 months. Like I really want a steady career. And so I spent probably 2 years, what I would describe it as kicking against the pricks.
Yeah.
I was so determined to not write anymore ever again. And I just went looking for another career, even though every time I went looking, I felt God turning me back and saying, this is your gift. This is your gift. Like, you need to trust this gift. And I was just like, no, I don't want this anymore. This is too much pressure. This is not bringing me joy, and I can't do it. I'm broken.
Yeah.
And all of those things were true. I was really broken. And then as I went through my healing process, I started sharing some things on Facebook, um, just little things about hope or joy or loneliness or whatever. And it was because nobody was asking for it, so there was no pressure, and nobody was publishing it except for myself, so there was no deadline, and they were just little bite-sized things. It was like I was taking baby steps back into writing, and I was finding that it could be really cathartic for me and really healing for me to write about what I was going through, even though I couldn't write a novel.
Yeah.
And so I had my person at my publisher's house, my project manager, he's a Facebook friend. And after I'd shared some of my thoughts and feelings on Facebook a few times, he reached out to me and said, I think, I love these messages, and I think this is something that is really needful in the world. And I think if you wanted to collect all of these thoughts and more, like maybe just think about that and maybe think about publishing it. And for me, the idea of publishing poetry, that's always been my great love. That was my great love from the time I was young all the way through college. But you talk to anyone and they'll tell you that you can't publish poetry. It's so hard to make any money. And so publishers just don't usually do it unless you're established, like Mary Oliver or something, like someone really amazing like that. And so the idea of getting my poetry published was like, like the 12-year-old inside of me had like the biggest inner party. I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I never thought I could do this. This would be like, this is my greatest ambition as a writer. I was kind of working my way towards that, but never thought it was actually going to be a possibility to get them published. And so that thrilled me. And so I spent the next year. Poetry is not something that can be forced. It's something that can be practiced, but you can never force a poem. They come from moments of introspection. They come from moments of inspiration. They come from seeing a beautiful sunset or something, right? But it's so different from writing fiction.
Yeah.
Writing fiction is it's so planned out.
Yeah.
It's like you have an idea and you're kind of scheming it all, whereas poetry and these essays was just like completely organic. They just came
Yes.
from
Kind of
me.
like that rawness of the moment. Everything gets poured into that one moment or thought or experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
So yeah, and so it was so healing for me, and it was I spent probably a year and a half just as they came, writing them. I love that I can get really detail oriented with poetry and choose just the right words and just the right meter. And when it's done forever. I love that. It's so satisfying as
Yeah.
a writer instead
Totally.
of this long novel that you could spend years trying to get just right. So
Yeah.
it was really just like baby steps back into writing until I kind of realized like, oh, okay, it's still there. The
Yeah.
gift is still there. I'm a different person now, but I can still use this gift to influence people.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so impressed. I think, it just breaks my heart hearing you talk about, I mean, really the trauma that you went through and how it affected your writing romantic novels. I mean, absolutely. I think I would have done the exact same thing. I would have said, nope, never again. I have to close the door. I can't do it. And to feel like you were totally broken as a writer, like it makes so much sense. And yet you were able to take probably the most cherished part of your gift and it wasn't tainted by your experience. And I'm like, what a blessing that was, that that part was not altered by this experience, right? That you were able to not only go back to that special part of your gift, but it helped you to heal from everything that you experienced. I mean, wow. Julianne, that's amazing. Yeah. So, as maybe like a peek into some of the topics, do you mind sharing some of the topics that you cover in your collection? Because I mean, it's deep and it's heavy and it's hard and like you're publishing. What do you call him? Your representative, your agent? I don't know.
Oh yeah, my publisher.
Your
Yeah,
pub,
my project manager.
your project manager. I thought it was so wise that he said like, this is something we really need, and I think that that's. I mean, yeah. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry, I'll stop talking.
It's okay. So yeah, it's just basically, you know, my reflections on living through the healing that my family has experienced over the past 4 years. And so there was a lot of dark times. There was mental illness, not just for me, but for my children. There was, and then on top of it, I got cancer. I kind of feel like one of those people where you're like, I don't think I want to be friends with you. I don't think you have very good luck.
Oh my gosh. So what kind of cancer did you get, Julianne?
I had thyroid cancer,
Okay.
which is not the worst. It's like the best kind of cancer to have, but it was just one of those things where it was like everything else was already hard, and then
Now you have to
and
go do all those treatments.
and I also just felt like I'm alone. I'm alone with all of this. Like, who even takes me to the hospital to get
Yeah.
this surgery? Like it was the feeling alone part. I think that was hard about going through that. But it also was not that bad. I mean, thyroid cancer is very treatable. It was just a little bit of a, really?
Yeah.
Really? This
Yeah.
you?
You're really
One
getting to
more
me
thing?
one more thing right now. And I hate to say it, but I still think it's like you say, it is not the worst of the cancers, but it's still cancer. And you were so amazing to take your kids every week to counseling. I can't think of a better thing to do for your kids, but obviously they had a lot to work through. They had to work through all the things you just mentioned, plus having to watch their mom suffer in another way on top of everything. That's got to be such a burden for them to carry. And so yeah, I'm so glad that you did that. I'm so glad. I mean, I'm sure they're grateful now, but there will be times that they will look back and they will just be so happy that you chose to take that time, that you chose to kind of give up. Again, talking about sacrificing yourself, you chose to make that sacrifice because you knew that they needed that. Um,
Yeah.
Oh goodness. I know a tiny, tiny bit about some of the hard things that you've faced because I'm friends with your sister and we have commiserated over hard things that have happened in our past. And so I just, yeah, coming from that place, I just want to say thank you for your kids. From your kids, thank you for taking that time because I think there is a time and a season where we literally do sacrifice everything for those children, and that was your time. And you learned from earlier experiences that it was not meant to be a continual sacrifice, but when that sacrifice and that time was meant to be, you were ready, you were prepared, and you were willing. And it was I'm sure that because of that, it will always be so much more like appropriately received by your kids because they knew what a sacrifice it was. They don't have this weird idea that mom will always take care of everything for me and always be there. Instead, they realize that at your deepest and darkest and most difficult times that you are willing to sacrifice for them. So anyways, sorry. I just want to just know that you're loved. And yeah, I'm sure that these gifts from your kids will keep giving, and they'll realize the older they get exactly how much it will impact them and their future lives just because of those choices that you made. So sorry.
I hope so. No, I really do. I feel like, we've talked a lot about like the sacrifices that come with motherhood and feeling like you don't have to lay yourself on the altar, but then there are those times that are crucial.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these are crucial years. These are like, do everything, like I felt like I needed to do everything I could to help my kids with their healing during these years so that it wasn't gonna affect them as much as if they had waited until they were adults to start their healing.
And
And
yeah. And I feel like even and yet you sacrifice so much, but because you already knew your gifts, you're able to use those gifts. And so you didn't necessarily have to get rid of all of yourself. And maybe from your perspective, you don't see this like perfect balance. And I hate to use the word balance, but I think there are like these kismet moments in our life when we find that perfect balance of like of serving and yet recognizing who we are, like doing all the things where it's almost like a superpower moment, right? And that's kind of, I don't know, I just think it's amazing that you were able to use that gift to help for you to heal, but then obviously because you were in that space, you're able to help your kids heal and you were still able to sacrifice. Like that's amazing, Julianne. I really think that most of us will probably only glimpse that moment a handful of times our whole earthly experience, right? Maybe some of us will only glimpse it once. But for you to be able to do that as a family, you and your 5 kids, that's amazing. That is so amazing. And I'm glad you didn't have to do it alone, right? I'm sure there were a lot of lonely moments, but you were able to do that with your kids, which makes it so much more powerful, right?
absolutely, I know that those experiences forged relationships between me and my kids and among themselves that wouldn't have formed any other way, you know, with an easier road wouldn't have made the same impressions on
Totally.
our souls. And you know, anything that I was able to do, that was all grace. That
Yeah.
was all God. That was, I mean, I certainly don't want anyone to think that I'm like some Wonder Woman, because I'm not. In fact, most of the time, when life got really hard, I would just imagine that I was a big boulder in a stream. And when the water was rushing over me, I would just curl into myself and just stay still
Yeah.
and submit. I'm like, this is all I can do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I'm out like putting on my Wonder Woman cape, tackling everything. It was like I had to rely on grace. I had to rely on strength beyond my own, because it was impossible for one person to get through what
Absolutely.
we what we did as a family.
Oh, and I love that the description of being the boulder in the stream. I think that's so wise. And you're right, you did. You took you went to the altar and you allowed that grace to hold you while the water's rushing over you, and to just allow that grace to just help your family move forward. And yeah, I just think taking all of that beautiful energy and then putting into this collection, so that then that those same feelings and all of that grace that helped carry your family will now be able to serve and carry others. And it's interesting, what I love most about poetry is that you can open up a collection and every day there's something meant for you, that maybe a few weeks ago that particular piece, it didn't have the same effect as it does today, because today is the day you need to read about that moment or feel and connect with those feelings. And so, yeah, I'm excited.
I love that about poetry too, and that it can grow with us as we grow. It's a very participatory form of art, more so than a story. I mean, it really does invite a lot of introspection and a lot of how do I feel about this, and how how do I not really apply it, but you know, are there things in my life that make me feel the way this poem does, and is this a new way I can think about these things? And I just, yeah, I love the form.
Yeah.
I could talk all day about how much I love
Oh,
it.
I love it. If there was one of the pieces in the collection that maybe helped you this week or last week as you thought about Mother's Day, is there any that you'd love to tell us about?
Oh, yeah. Um, okay. It's so hard to choose. Okay.
Sorry, guys, we didn't plan this part. I'm throwing it on Julianne.
Okay, yes, I think as far as Mother's Day, I think this is the poem. So, in case, I mean, for those who aren't as familiar with this story in the Bible, the widow of Zarephath, the prophet Elijah approached her during this awful drought when no one had anything and asked her for food. And she says, all I have is, you know, a little oil and a little meal in the barrel. And I'm going to make this for myself and my son, and then we're going to die. And he says, first make for me, and then for you and your son. And she did. She had faith in that if she gave first to him, that she would have enough. And the cruse of oil and the barrel of meal never failed until the drought ended. So that's the background for this poem. Every day, like the widow of Zarephath, I tip the cruse of oil, reach my hand into the barrel of meal, expecting emptiness. I am flawed, impatient, afraid, insecure, but I am also his. And because I am his, there is always oil, there is always meal, sustenance instead of emptiness, deliverance instead of death, hope instead of despair.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, so many thoughts and feelings. I mean, yeah. I mean, how many times have I considered that one story in the Bible, but then to look at it from a different perspective and I love the way that you invite each of us to really connect with her and then also our experience feeling those same feelings. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's so easy to be hard on ourselves. It's like a part of being a woman, and having a desire to be better
Yeah.
can sometimes turn to just focusing on what we lack.
Yeah.
And I spend every day aware of my weaknesses. Those are just some of them that
Yeah.
I listed. And yet I'm just in awe that that grace can fill up for all my missing parts and all the ways that I fall short. There's always plenty of grace,
Yeah.
plenty of it, for what I need, for what a neighbor needs, or my children need, or anyone who's in my sphere, that I can have enough.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. Do you mind sharing just one
Yeah.
more to kind of like whet somebody's palate? Like, okay, this is the one that Julianne would recommend that you hear before you go and get your clothes.
Okay, I'll share my favorite one. Well, I don't know, they're all my favorites,
I know, I
but
was gonna say, I kind of have a hard time asking about favorites because I know it's so hard to pick.
okay, sorry, I don't have it marked. Okay, one second.
Oh, your sweet cat. So cute.
Okay. Today I didn't write. Today I watched 5 episodes of Just Add Magic with my little boys cuddled on the couch, holding hands with the youngest during the suspenseful parts. Today I didn't write. Today I walked to a cemetery and read gravestones and thought about how precious our time is here with our loved ones. I lay on the grass and sent a message to an old friend. Go to Europe with me next year? Hell yeah, was her response. Today I didn't write. Today I made meatloaf, which is strangely my kids' favorite dinner. Baked potatoes and glazed carrots. We all sat down together, which was also strange because usually I'm standing. Tonight I didn't write. Tonight I gave my son a bath with lots of toys, all the toys, and read books to him in my bed. I let him fall asleep there with his brother and the dog. I will sleep somewhere else. This is the only thing I have written today, that relationships are more important than money or success, and that the writing can wait, but living cannot.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So many great images. First of all, I love cemeteries. I love to read the headstones too. And there's just always such a special feeling. But thank you for reminding us about all those, about the relationships and how that's truly the most important. Making the meatloaf, reading the books with your son, the bath with all the toys. I mean, we can all just like perfectly picture all those moments. Maybe it's not exactly the same, but very, very similar. Oh, those are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful moments. That's another good mothers. That's another good mother or caregivers poem. Oh, thank you so much for sharing these. I know it's so personal, and that's what I love about it. I think that we'll find so much just support and love and grace that you've talked about as we just really continue to just pick them up. And I love that. I love being able to just read one poem and just soak it in throughout the day and not read another one until my thoughts are ready to welcome in another one, you know? Well, cool. Okay, so tell us like where can we find more of you and your work? I know that I'll link to Amazon because I know that's where pretty much everyone can buy all your stuff right now. But what other things do we need to know about? Obviously your website. I'll put links to the website.
Yeah, so my website, and then I'm more active on Facebook than I am on Instagram. And so, in fact, sometimes I'll share little poems or little things on
Yeah,
Facebook. Yeah, so just find me on there under my name.
cool.
And I have a couple of things coming up. So one is I have a Regency Retreat, which is like, it's basically like if you've ever wanted to step into a Jane Austen movie and be one of the characters, this is what it's like. So it's and I'm in the process of updating my website, so I'll have a link to that page soon. But the Regency is,
Should I show them those pictures real quick?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's see if I can.
Oh, and I do have a website for it. So regencyretreat.com.
Oh yeah. .com. Cool. Now can you see that page, the coming soon page?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just gonna click on the picture so you guys can see, and then maybe you could just kind of, so
Oh,
where is this at?
yeah. So this is at Wadley Farms in Linden. It's a wedding venue, and it has this amazing castle and these beautiful grounds and vineyards. And so this is coming into the castle. All these cute girls and women were lined up before we were even ready to open. Everyone came dressed up.
Oh,
We had bonnet making and embroidery and classes and tea and musical performances. We had a beautiful male model dressed up like a really good looking Mr. Darcy or Frank Churchill. And people could take pictures with. And we had a horse and carriage there for them to ride. And then we had dance lessons. And then at night we had dinner and ball, and we had a promenade with a costume contest. And
oh my gosh.
it was so fun. And this year we're having some fencing and duel demonstrations and watercolor classes, and basically just, if you just want to escape
Yeah.
the modern world and just for a day or an evening be in a really elegant place and just feel like a true lady, then this is the event for you. So
That is so special. Okay, so I am curious, how long does the Regency retreat, how long is it? Is it like a weekend or
it's just one day. It's Saturday
one day?
from 11 a.m. until 10 p.m. And there's different tickets you can get. You can get just the daytime, or you can get
Huh.
the dinner and ball, or you can get both.
Did you tell us the date that was going to be?
It's September 25th,
Cool.
and tickets go on sale June 1st.
Okay,
So you
awesome.
can find tickets on regencyretreat.com.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, yeah, I'll add all those to the post. That's incredible. Holy cow. Especially right now when when many of us feel like we can't travel. You know, my sister, like I said, she's homesick because she can't get over here. It just
Yeah.
can't seem to get over here yet. And yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so we've got the Regency retreat coming up, and then obviously you can go to Amazon to purchase Julianne's novels and her poetry collection. Any other events that you want to tell us about?
No, that's it for now. Just that in my classes, and
Oh, yes, the
I'll
class.
give you some links to the classes.
Cool. Yeah, send me some links to the classes, and then of course, definitely sign up for Julianne's email list, because that's probably another place that you're putting out information, maybe, or just Facebook.
Oh, I totally should. I mean, you're bringing up all of the things I've been thinking I need to do as a person with a career. I need an email list.
That's okay. That's okay. Definitely. Well, yeah. So probably the best thing is to follow you on Facebook to know what's going on, huh?
Facebook and Instagram.
Facebook.
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm writer Julianne, and Facebook, I'm Julianne Donaldson. And yes, that's where I put everything. And
Okay.
someday I will get my act together and I will do all the other things too.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah. Let's get your 18-year-old son graduated, right? We'll do that first. Oh,
Yeah.
Julianne, thank you so much. This has been such a treat.
You
I'm
could,
sure this is really gonna make everyone's day and week and probably month until they can get to the retreat in September. That's so awesome. Well, gosh, thank you so much for just sharing all of these things and for just being you. We just really appreciate it.
oh, thank you, Katrina. I had such a good time talking to you. You have such a lovely spirit, and I can tell we're already bosom friends. So we should take a trip to England together sometime and
I
just
would love that. And my sisters would love that. They would love that if I have an excuse to come see them. So definitely. Oh, well, thank you again, and sending so much love from Julianne and I from the Candy Colored Studio. And have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.